Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for EarthEcho's STEMExplore Virtual Career Connection featuring Alex Dorgan, Technical Assistant to the VP for Strategic Technologies at United Technologies in East Hartford, Connecticut. My name is Casey. I'm a Programs Manager here at EarthEcho International, and we are so excited to have students from all over the globe joining us as we learn about exciting and sustainable careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. This live event is part of STEMexplore, EarthEcho's program that brings inspiration to life by telling the stories of dynamic female professionals in STEM careers during live virtual career connections. We want to thank our founding sponsor, United Technologies, for their tremendous support of this program and for their support of women in STEM. Here at EarthEcho, we believe that youth have the power to change the planet. Visit www.earthecho.org to learn more about our programs. You can also access more of our resources like STEMexplore's career profile videos, as well as tune in for upcoming live events just like this one. I'd like to recognize and thank STEMexplore's after-school partner sites across the country and recognize those that have joined us live today. So let's head to Hartford, Connecticut and get a hello from our friends at Windsor High School with the YWCA Hartford region. Hello, Windsor High. So happy to have you ladies joining us this afternoon, and we will come back to you to get your questions for our expert, Alex. We also want to give a warm welcome to everyone tuning in to our live streams. And just a reminder that you can send us in questions for our STEM expert via chat, and we will break throughout today's presentation to see if you have any questions for Alex. Feel free to start typing questions into the chat space on YouTube if you're watching the live stream there, or in the Zoom live feed if you're watching here. We'll be sure to answer all your questions as we go along. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to give a warm welcome to our special guest for today's STEMexplore Virtual Career Connection, Alex Dorgan. Hello, Alex.
Hi.
So wonderful to have you here.
Thanks.
Now, Alex currently assists the VP for Strategic Technologies in a variety of tasks related to his role defining the technology roadmap for United Technologies, or UTC. These tasks include identifying needs and opportunities for workforce development, building partnerships with universities and companies, and developing technical expertise in key focus areas. On a day-to-day basis, Alex works with the team to aggregate and present information, pulling together financial information, preparing for external speaking engagements, and facilitating communication across organizations. Being able to communicate effectively, track objectives, grasp technical concepts, and adapt quickly are skills that Alex uses on a daily basis to be successful in her ever-changing environment at UTC. So Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes. So hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I decided I would just quickly start this presentation by giving you a little bit of background on who I am, where I come from, how I kind of got to UTC. So on this slide here, I'm originally from Boston. So I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, in the city, kind of grew up. I really loved nature. I really loved playing outside. I loved reading. I remember I would read books and my mom would yell at me, when I was hiding under the covers to go to sleep. Went to high school, played tennis and soccer, graduated, and I attended college at Skidmore College, which is in upstate New York in Saratoga Springs. And when I first joined college, I thought that I wanted to be a dentist. So that's why we have the tooth there, and that I wanted to major in economics. And throughout my college career, I switched majors many times. There was one point where I was going to be a business major. There was one point where I was going to be a neuroscience major. And so going to a liberal arts college really helped me have the ability to be able to switch back and forth between a bunch of different ideas and courses and topics that I could try out and see if I liked or not. Eventually, I had to graduate at some point, and I settled on art as a major and minored in business. And along the way, I did a variety of activities, which I highlight on that slide. I was part of the riding team. So there's an equestrian team at Skidmore. I also was on the circus club, and I was really heavily involved in our dance club as well there. And then post-graduating, I worked for the Loeb Fellowship, which is based out of the Harvard Graduate School of Design. It's a fellowship that's geared towards architects and architecture writers. And I helped the coordinator of the program, so it wasn't related to STEM or engineering or anything like that. But there were a lot of big ideas there that I got to kind of listen in on and be a part of helping make possible. And then after that, I got an internship at United Technologies, specifically at United Technologies Research Center. And after a few months of interning there, they offered me a job and I accepted. And then just in March of this year, I transferred over from the research center to corporate, and that's where I am currently. So
Alex,
I'm not sure what will happen next, but that's where I've been so far.
Great. So Alex, you have a very interesting path. It's clear that you have an artistic interest and you're kind of in this engineering realm. So I know you'll talk about that in a little bit, but can you speak to how did it come to be that you did get that internship at UTC?
Yeah, so when I graduated from college, I did not know what UTC was. And I don't think that's that uncommon. UTC is more of a holding company, so they own a lot of other companies that people might know the names of more. But I got the internship because I met the person who founded the human-machine interaction team at UTRC at the research center. So that's a team that was focused around doing research on how people can connect with technology in order to be able to better facilitate their jobs within the UTC environment. So you can think of it as, when you go visit a website or something along those lines, somebody designed that website, right? So you've gone to websites that are really great and they're easy to use, and you've gone to websites that are not so great and are very hard to use. And so the role that the person who established that group was looking to fill was the role of a designer. So that's what I did there. But I met them first informally. And then about a year after I had met them, learned that they were establishing the group. And so I reached out and asked if I could intern.
Awesome. Okay. So this brings up two key points that I'm thinking of for all the students tuning in out there. One, if you think you might not have an interest in engineering, there potentially could be a pathway there. Say, for example, you're into web design or coding or art. And I come from a marine science background, and definitely art is not something people think of when they think of a marine research laboratory, for example. But there are these various positions that can get you to some place where you might end up having a passion for, that you might already have a passion for, but maybe your best laid skills are somewhere else, like in art. So that's really interesting. You also brought up networking, how you met someone. You met someone personally, but then also that turned into a professional relationship. So networking is something, and we can talk about this a little bit more when our students have questions, but networking is so important on a personal level and a professional level to kind of groom those connections, because you never know where they might lead.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that point pretty heavily, because for me, at least, every single job opportunity that I've heard of or that I've pursued has been through somebody kind of saying, hey, I know you were interested in this. I heard about this somewhere. And that's how I've gotten, all the positions that I've had so far, is by telling people, this is what I'm interested in. This is what I'd like to do. And by having that network of people that's kind of looking out for me and saying, oh yeah, I remember Alex said that she wanted to do, research, or she wanted to do something that's similar to this. They might just forward a job description your way, or maybe even write you a recommendation letter or something like that. And that's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really great to put yourself out there, tell people what it is that you're interested or what you're looking for. So let's dive in a little bit more to that internship at UTC and kind of the path that you've been on. What has that looked like for you?
Sure. Yeah, so when I started off, I was an intern. So I kind of, on this slide, you can see I chunked my work experience into the first half, the research intern, associate research engineer, and research engineer. In all of those roles, I did something very similar. And then the second part of the slide is what I do now. So there are a few pictures here. I'll just talk to what each one of them is. So the first two on the side are virtual and augmented reality applications. So a lot of the research that we did at the Research Center was centered around augmented and virtual reality applications in aerospace or in elevator or building maintenance systems. And I don't know if anybody has heard of the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift or the HoloLens maybe, but those are all devices that enable you to, wear a headset, and you can either be fully immersed in a virtual environment, or you can see through to the real world, but have some information overlaid onto that. And so the questions that we were trying to answer were, how can we use this new technology in a way that helps the people at UTC do their job better, whether maybe it's somebody doing maintenance on an engine. Could you do maintenance on an engine and show them something that maybe previously they would have to look up somewhere else, and how can you design these tools so that people find them easy to use, so that they're understandable, and so that they don't get in the way, but that they actually help whoever is doing the work that we're trying to augment. And then I also work a lot with this idea of user experience design and iterative design. And that is kind of that design, learn, test, build cycle that you see at the bottom of that picture. And this is something that I really believe in. So when we're designing these tools and applications, you can't just design something and assume that just because you thought of it, it's the best design in the world, right? The chances are it's not. So what we would do is we would build prototypes, and we'd go out onto the field, and we would meet with somebody who fixes elevators, and we'd say, okay, you do this every day, day in, day out. You are the expert on fixing elevators. Can you try this prototype that we built and tell us what you think of it? And the feedback wasn't always positive. A lot of times we got feedback that they didn't really like the things that we were building. And, it's a little disappointing when you work so hard on something and maybe it's not what was needed right away, but that's fine, right? We would take that information, come back, iterate on the prototype, and then bring it back again the next week or the next couple weeks. Then by doing that over and over again, we were able to build something that was actually useful. So that's kind of the process that I followed and the types of applications that I worked on. The picture on the top I just put in because I think it's kind of cool. I got to go to Dubai as part of my work experience, to the Dubai Air Show, and so I am standing in front of a few different aircraft. If you look in the background to the back and to the left, you can see a really funny looking aircraft that has kind of two propellers facing upwards. That aircraft is really cool because it has the ability to vertically take off, and then the engines will kind of rotate so that you can fly forward. And yeah, so that's what I did at the Research Center, kind of talking to people, building designs based on those requirements, iterating on those designs, and kind of like for a few projects we did actually implement them, but because we're at the Research Center, a lot of our prototypes didn't fully get to product, but some of them did, and I think those were some of the most interesting projects for me. So then now I've moved over to corporate, and that means that I spend a lot less time working on individual projects, but I get to spend a lot more time interacting with different people across the business. So, UTC makes tons of stuff. We make jet engines, we make aircraft controls, we make, if anyone's ever flown and you have to adjust the little nozzle for the air to come out on the airplane, we make those too. Hopefully no one's ever had to use them, but we also make evacuation slides. And so I'm learning a lot more about the different business units of UTC in my current role. I also work to kind of facilitate other teams working together. So by building tools or maybe aggregating information. And for me, it's very much a learning role where I get to work with people who've been in the field for a really long time and have a lot of experience. And yeah, I think that's kind of a good summary of my two roles at UTC up until this point.
Perfect. It sounds like you've done some pretty amazing stuff so far. And now we're going to take a little break and we're going to go to our sites to see if anyone has any questions for Alex. Now, before we go live to our friends up in Hartford, Connecticut, I do want to remind everyone who's watching via our live streams that you can chat in questions for those. So go ahead and use that chat space on YouTube or in the Zoom to type in those questions for us. But we're going to check in with STEMExplore after school partner sites. We're going to start with the YWCA Hartford region. So let's head up to Windsor High School in Hartford, Connecticut. What questions do you have for Alex this afternoon? And it looks like you're muted, Windsor High.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay.
I can hear you.
My question was, when you switched your major and minor various times as an undergraduate in college, do you think that benefited your footing in the UTC internship? Like, did you think that you got a variety of?
Don't talk. I think that's got to go.
I think, are you Unita or Ruth?
No, I'm not.
This is a student with them. So
Okay.
the question is, do you believe that, or actually you came up to the camera. Go ahead and ask it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you believe that changing your minor and major as an undergraduate during college benefited your footing in the internship during UTC? Like, did you believe you got various varieties of like the skill sets that did help you get like a better hand on doing various tasks during, the internship?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The short answer is yes, and I'll tell you exactly why. So you'll see, as you progress in your educational career, you'll see that every single discipline kind of views the world and problems in a different way. I think most educational disciplines try to solve problems, right? And so like that's a lot of what engineering is about. It's about problem solving. But on the other hand, economics is also about problem solving. It's just about economic problems, and they approach it in a different way. And so I really liked being able to switch between classes and perspectives, because in each of those majors, if you will, I got a different perspective on how to approach and solve problems. And I think that overall helped me be able to come up with a more general way of approaching every situation that I get into, right? So, maybe I look at something and I say, oh, if I was just thinking about this from, let's say like a psychology perspective, here's how I would think about the problem. Or maybe I'm solving it as an artist, right? What would I think about if I was solving a problem that way? What are the different kinds of solutions that I would think of if I was doing it that way? Or maybe as a designer, how do I approach the problem that way? So I think being able to switch and get all those experiences definitely helped with kind of getting a variety of experience, and then two, being used to switching, right? Because when I first joined UTC, let me tell you, a large engineering company is not anything like a small liberal arts college where you studied art. It's a very different culture. It's a very different language even. I like to tell people that my first 3 weeks, I didn't understand what anybody was saying, just because there's a lot of acronyms in corporate America, and kind of like a lot of foundational knowledge that engineers have. That's a little bit common. And so it took me a while to get used to the language, but because I had been switching, throughout my career, I was able to kind of adapt more quickly. And then, actually, as one final point on that, I really believe that if I had studied engineering, I would not have been able to get into the research center as easily, because most people at the research center hold a PhD. It's about 75%. And so I only have an undergraduate degree. And because I studied art, I was able to be unique and kind of promote myself as a designer rather than an entry-level engineer, because there are many entry-level engineers who maybe have heard of UTC and might have been wanting that position. But because of my unique background, I was able to say, hey, you know, I can bring a fresh perspective. I can think about this in a different way, and I'm really willing to learn and pick all of that up.
Great.
That's
Thank you.
awesome. That was
Yeah.
a really great question, by the way. Windsor High, do we have another question for Alex?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Hi.
Hello.
My question is, what other career paths in the STEM field would you pursue in the future with the majors and minors you have switched to?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So because I don't have like a pure engineering background, I'm limited in terms of, you know, do I want to go and actually be designing the airfoil on an airplane or something like that, right? You need to have that foundation in order to go do that job. You know, but there are other options for me going forward, right? Maybe I could do more project management, or maybe I could do more kind of along education. You know, there are initiatives in the company where you may not be doing the engineering yourself, but there are skills that engineers need at your company. And how do you get that content created and delivered to them in a way that they can use it? And so you still have to understand the major concepts that are coming through and work very closely with engineers to put that together. But you don't necessarily need to have studied it in school. Another option, right? So I'm still very early in my career. I've only been at UTC for about a little under 5 years. So I might go back to school and I might get more of a technical training. And so then I can kind of go more into the technical aspects of it. But I think like project management, leading teams, maybe being a product owner for a less technical product. There are tons of options, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great question. Do we have another at Windsor High?
No. No more.
All right, sounds good. We'll come back, Windsor High. We'll continue with Alex's talk. So I have a feeling you might have more for her. Great questions. For now, let's head south to West Palm, Florida, to our STEMExplore After School partners at FAU Pine Jog Environmental Center. Pine Jog, what questions do you have for Alex?
Oh, there's like a run to the microphone there.
It's great.
Oh. Okay. Okay, go ahead. So
How was your childhood like?
What was my childhood like?
Yep.
I guess it was pretty fun. I grew up in a small. So the area that I grew up in has lots of college students, but my street had a bunch of families. And so my two next door neighbors were kind of my best friends growing up, and I would run around the streets and, you know, like dig holes in people's yards and just like pretend and play outside. I also played a lot of tennis when I was little. We lived right next to a park. And throughout high school, actually, after playing tennis, I taught tennis there. So yeah, it was good. I think I was able to enjoy the outdoors and have the benefits of living in a city, and yeah.
And I think FAU Pine Jog, you may have missed it, but Alex grew up in Boston. So
Yes.
Just so you know. All right, Pine Jog, let's take another question.
Is this your forever job?
Is this my forever job? So I think the short answer is probably no, right? Because in the last 5 years, I've had 4 positions if you count my internship, right? And so I think it's not that common for somebody to go into a job right out of school and then stay in that job for the rest of their career. I think it's pretty common to switch between different things. And that's something that I really enjoy about UTC, at least, is that because it's so big and there are locations everywhere, you could work on a different thing every single day and switch, every few months and never get bored.
That's good. All right, Pine Jog, let's take one more question before we continue on with Alex's story.
Do you like your job and why?
Do you like your job and why?
Yeah, I do like my job. I like it because of the variety. That's something that's always been a constant, as you can see through all those changes I made in college. I really like to be stimulated by new things all the time. And in my role right now as an assistant, every day is a new thing, right? Everything that I work on is really fast turnaround, and you get to work with different people. And so I like that aspect. And I also like that I get to work for a company that works on really big stuff, right? So now every time I get on an airplane and I fly somewhere, I look at the engine and I look at, when you land, the engine cowl moves back and that's how you slow down. And I've learned so much stuff that I can just notice in my day-to-day life. So I like that a lot too.
Awesome. Great questions, everyone. Wow. Well, Alex, let's kind of continue following you along in your journey. Now, I understand that UTC has taken you to some interesting places.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I put together this map and it shows all of the places that I've been able to travel with UTC. So as you can see, there are lots of places in the US. Actually, I think you guys are based out of, so Windsor is based out of close to Hartford, right? So we're right next door. And then I think the other school is based out of West Palm.
Yep.
And so we actually have a facility down there where a lot of our military engines are made, and some kind of like special, let's say, test engine testing is done as well. So I've gotten to go down and visit you guys in West Palm. And then even beyond the US, I've been able to travel to France and Dubai and China with UTC. And I figured I would give you guys a little bit of insight into what I did at those places. So those were kind of special projects, along with the research that we did, kind of working on prototypes and tools for virtual and augmented reality. We also did some work with the marketing department at UTC. And so that's another thing that I really enjoyed, is being able to work with different departments and on different projects and on different things, right? So we put together a couple of experiences for trade shows and air shows. And so I'll show you just a couple of clips from two of those ones.
Perfect. Let's roll.
One of the coolest things that Pratt & Whitney is doing at its booth this year is this virtual reality experience where customers get a chance to really dive into and get an up-close and personal view of the geared turbofan engine.
The virtual reality that you see behind me is something we use in the customer training center.
Having the customer training virtual reality, they get a peek inside what we're developing for the future.
Yes, that was down in Florida, and we put on a show for MRO Americas. So something that you don't really think about too much is that when you fly an airplane, it needs to get serviced, just like your car needs to get serviced. So, there are people who change the oil on an airplane. There are people who work on the engine. There are people who work really hard on maintaining these huge machines that fly through the air every day to bring us to wherever we're going. And so there's a whole conference around it, and we were able to present some work that we did with the Customer Training Center. So Pratt & Whitney has a facility where they train people how to do that, basically how to maintain an engine. And we worked with them to create a tool that might help with that training. So that's what they were talking about there. And then the next clip is from the Paris Air Show. And that one is just cool because, it's one of the largest air shows in the world. So you can see aircraft from all over the place there. And we were able to kind of have a small spot in the chateau. And if you look carefully at this clip, you can actually see me in it for like a half second. So,
all right, let's see if you all can spot Alex.
Digital storytelling experience doesn't stop here, however. Once customers have absorbed all the Pratt & Whitney stories, they can head this way inside the UTC pavilion over to the UTC Aerospace Systems side, where they'll get a virtual reality experience.
It's a totally immersive experience. You have a visual experience where you're inside actually an aircraft, and we take you through all of the different, we have 90 product lines on a plane, but most of them are invisible to the traveling public. You can't see where our systems are. The virtual reality reality experience will let you go inside the plane and actually fly around and go around the engine and see the nacelle. You'll see all of the electric systems. You'll see all the power systems.
There's also a
Yeah. And I think that last point so that was Stacy McNeil, who worked at Collins Aerospace. And I really love the point that she makes about not being able to see all the systems on an aircraft when you go into it. And I think what's really great about engineering is that you start looking at the world a little bit differently, right? You start seeing these things that you interact with every day, right? Like, I don't know, maybe you have an iPhone and you use it all the time and you flip through it, but how does that actually get made, right? How did we get all of those things into this little tiny cube that we carry around in our pockets, right? And so I actually met somebody who, not through UTC, this is kind of like, back to the networking point, I guess. I went to a wedding and I met somebody who actually does product design at Apple for the iPhone. And so she works with the designers, and she is part of the team that actually works on fitting, that amazing camera into that small, tiny box, which is not an easy task. And so that's kind of what I love about working in an engineering environment.
That is awesome. And we have had some other professionals from Collins Aerospace actually join us to talk about some of the work that they do as well through United Technology. So it's really great to kind of bring all these things together. And for those of you who are tuning in, you can find all previous STEMExplore virtual career connections on our website. Just visit earthecho.org and you can actually watch the playbacks, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can watch the playbacks there as well. So it's really neat to kind of connect this, and especially the students out there tuning in. Like, I know that some students that are tuning in today were there when we talked with Shilpa about how they design interiors of aircrafts and what that means. So it's really neat. And I love that you bring up the fact that as an engineer, you start seeing the world in a different way. So I think that's really great. So can we talk about a reality about engineering in general? And in fact, let's hone in on research engineering, something that you're becoming more and more familiar with. So can we talk about some realities of that? Like, for example, how much could somebody expect to make if they were a research engineer?
Yeah, so I mean, it runs the gamut, right? I think this is kind of like an average, rough baseline, you shouldn't expect that coming into the research field that this would be exactly what you would get. But like I said, most of the people at the research center have a PhD. So after going through your undergraduate and then maybe a master's or maybe just straight to PhD, I think kind of like the 90K mark is maybe like a low estimate of what you could expect to make kind of working at a research center. Keep in mind that this is dependent on what field you're in. So maybe if you're in computer science or maybe you do data science, you might expect more versus maybe if you're in an area that is less in demand, you might expect less. So it really varies on where you live, right? What you studied, how far you went in your schooling, right? So maybe if you only have a master's, maybe it would be knocked down to more like the high 70s, right? 70,000, 78,000, dollars a year or something along those lines. But I think this is a fair, rough estimate for maybe the local area on what you might expect to make right out of school. And I guess if people have questions specifically about that, I can kind of help answer. I'm not in HR, right? So I don't have all the answers in terms of salary, but it really varies on what you go into and where you're working.
And I think it's important to note too, while you look at, the average base pay that we found here from Glassdoor, $88,000 sounds like a lot of money, but also that depends on where you're living. If you live in a city, a big city, San Francisco or Boston for that matter, it might not be that much because the cost of living is a little bit higher. So it always varies. Do you have any thoughts on schools or interning and kind of that pathway to engineering in general, or even using your pathway as an example?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll make one more point on the salary and then I'll switch that. So I will say, like, you can, in areas like San Francisco or Boston, I know people who right out of undergraduate for, no master's, no PhD, have kind of made above 100K. So maybe like 120 as a starting salary, or maybe after a few years of experience, even up to like $200,000 in the Bay Area, right? So it's really broad. And then, so internships are super, super important. And I say that now because as part of my job now, I help with a little bit of recruiting and understanding how we get our talent pipeline, right? So the way that a company will look at people or students coming out of school is, they're really invested in finding good people who will come to the company, who will, work hard, who are passionate about what they do and are qualified. And one thing that they look at is whether or not you've had previous intern experience with the company or maybe with a similar company. And so if you guys ever have a chance to do an internship, maybe in an area that you think you're interested in, or with a company that you might be interested in, I would highly recommend that you do that, right? And even if you go and do that internship, if it's a summer or even a winter or even a few weeks, you'll at least get a chance to see, oh, do I like this or do I not like this, right? It's not a one-way street. It's not like people are just hiring you and you don't have any choice in it. Definitely do those internships and use that as a way to, one, gain experience, and two, maybe build a relationship with a company that you might want to work for. And so that's something that I didn't do many internships in my undergraduate career. I stayed kind of with the same place throughout, but it would have been really helpful in kind of helping me decide what areas I wanted to go to if I had done more of them.
That's awesome. That's excellent advice. Now, Alex, here at EarthEcho International, we believe that we can act now for a sustainable future. So can you maybe touch on how you see your work that you're contributing, how that acts now for a sustainable future, or what you're working towards?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, UTC builds jet engines, right? So these are the engines that go on commercial aircraft. So when you go maybe fly on a plane and visit, Disneyland, or if you have family, well, maybe not for the people in Florida, but, if you have family somewhere else and it's Thanksgiving and you go visit them and you have to get on a plane, that plane and that engine uses fuel, right? And that fuel is not really a renewable resource, right? And so UTC really works to kind of make their engines as efficient as possible, to make their aircraft systems kind of as effective as possible. And there's kind of the physical engineering that you can do. You can engineer something so that it works better, that it functions better. And then there's also kind of the data side of things, where you can look at the information that comes from an engine or that comes from your systems and try to look for patterns so that you can help identify areas that you might be able to improve upon, not based on maybe based on engineering changes or maybe based on other things. But I like working for a company that really tries to kind of make things as efficient as possible, and by doing so maybe reduces fuel consumption. And in addition to kind of the environmental, benefits of that, there's also a lot of economic incentive to do that. But there are just a few numbers on this slide, right? Almost 3 million passengers every day, and this is only in the US. 44,000 plus flights and 5,000 aircraft in the sky at the same time, right? That's a lot of airplanes flying through the sky. And the map that was playing on the video, that just shows flight paths in the US throughout one day. So I don't know if you can click play one more time, but I like this visualization because it's over the course of 24 hours, right? So this is in one day, you're seeing all of the flight paths across the US. So you can kind of see, Florida is down at the bottom right hand, and maybe Maine is up in the upper right hand. And this is at 1 a.m. in the morning. So at nighttime, it gets a little darker. There aren't that many planes flying. And then as the day progresses, okay, it's 5 a.m. All right, it's 6 a.m. And then at around 6 a.m., you can see it starts to get a little lighter and people are starting to, I don't know, start their day, travel wherever they want for work. And you can see it really lights up. And so I think this kind of visualization is really cool to see, you know, how much people are flying, and it's only projected to grow even more, right? I think I read a number the other day that said by 2037, there would be something like 8.2 billion people traveling, which is quite a lot more than today, right? So how can we make this type of travel sustainable? Because today, at the way it's going, it might not be, right?
Absolutely. All right, Alex, before we break for our last set of questions, what sort of advice would you give to any students that might be exploring a career similar to yours, or just trying to get a grasp on that professional world that they have ahead of them?
Yeah. So I think the point has been made that I don't have a traditional path to this career. And I think, you know, if you know that you're really interested in engineering, I would go and get that engineering degree, right? You know, you get a lot more hands-on experience and things like that. For me, I'm going to give advice from my experience and what I've found useful. And so here I have just one little slide. The first thing is kind of be curious. So ask what is making the world work. Ask, you know, just ask a lot of questions, and try to make connections and understand what's going on around you, because that'll help you in a lot of ways. The orange peel is there because there was this business example that I learned about when I took some business classes at school that I really liked. And in this scenario, there are two companies and they are trying to have access to oranges. And the two companies are just like outbidding each other, and the price of oranges is going up and up and up because everybody wants the same oranges, and there are only, I don't know, let's say 100 oranges. And eventually they discover that one of the companies is a perfume company and one of the companies is an orange juice company, right? And so even though they all want oranges, one of the companies wants the orange juice and one of the companies wants the orange peel so that they can put it in their perfumes. And so I really like this example because I think it helps you to understand that you don't always have to fight people in order to get what you want, that if you come to the table with an open mind and try to work together, you guys might both end up getting something that works out in the end. And I like taking that as kind of a way to approach people and the way that I work. I don't think that it should be combative. And so the point here is kind of like, you know, be nice to people. Don't give up, you know, what you're trying to achieve, but really try to work together with people, right? And be open to collaborating. Then the picture of the bricks. So this also comes from my school. They have I guess a tagline or a motto. It's creative thought matters. So it's kind of a joke among the students, but I think it is also very applicable. You know, sometimes you can add the most value by just thinking of something in a little bit of a different way, right? So maybe there's an obvious answer, but maybe you can come with a solution that people haven't thought of. And so really think of unique ways to put things together or combining different things. And especially in research, you know, a lot of the best ideas come when you combine two different areas, and there's an idea that kind of crosses across those two areas, because it's hard to think of truly new things. But if you can think of ways to bring things together that already exist that people haven't thought of, you know, it can be really impactful. So then I've got Serena Williams on here, and for those of you, I don't know how many people play tennis, but she's doing a forehand and she has just finished her stroke, and that's called the follow through. So there's 2 points to be made here. One is always follow through on your commitments. When I first joined UTC, I asked the president of the research center, I asked him, what could I do to be successful in my new role? There was a lunch for the new hires. And he said, be known for something, right? So that there's something that people come to you to ask you questions about, and follow up on your commitments. And just by doing that, people will learn to rely on you and that they can trust you, and that you're a good person to go to when things happen and things need to get done. And then the second thing is, the follow through in tennis is important because if you know where you're going to end up, it'll help you kind of on the way there. And so I think planning is also pretty important. You have to have a vision for where you're going in order to execute well. And then I already kind of talked about this, but ask lots of questions. Don't be afraid that they're dumb or everybody else in the room knows what people are talking about and you don't know what you're talking about. Oftentimes you'll find that people have the same questions as you. And if you just ask them, then everyone is on the same page.
I like it because chances are somebody probably has the same question you do, but they're too shy to speak up. So I love that. That's a great piece of advice. All right. So now, speaking of questions, let's ask some questions. So I do want to check in with our friends up at Windsor High. I did see that students, it looked like some of them have dismissed, but I do think we have a young lady there who might have a question for you. So Windsor High, let's take your question.
Hello again.
It's not really a question, more so a statement. Me, a senior, I'm entering college like this upcoming next year. I think it's very interesting how your college path and doing various different tasks has applied to your internship. So for me, I want to major in secondary English education, which has a lot of internships in order to get certification. And I think just you explaining in depth how, I don't know, just how interested you are in your own internship without really having a large background on it. It's very interesting to me. I think it would help me pursue different internships that may not also apply to what I'm looking for long-term as my career.
Yeah, no, definitely reach out to, whoever you can in your network and see what you can get for those and don't get discouraged either, right? Especially in an area where it's expected that you will do a lot of internships and you'll have a lot of experience like you described. I had a friend who made a spreadsheet and applied to 50 jobs before she got one, right? But, she got one in the end and she kept trying and sometimes that's what it takes. But also, get out in the community, talk to somebody who who already does that job and they'll be your best bet for directing you to where you can find something.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to have you, Windsor High. All right, Pine Jog Environmental. I think we have time for I hate to say it because I know you're lined up, but I think we have time for just a couple of questions. So let's go ahead and get those started from Pine Jog.
Would you recommend your job to other girls?
Yeah, I would. I'd recommend it to other girls and I'd recommend it to to anybody who has an interest in business, who has an interest in understanding how organizations work, who just want to see a lot of stuff and get their hands in a lot of things.
Okay, go ahead,
If this wasn't your job, what would your job be?
I'm not entirely sure. When I was little, I wanted to make documentaries, like marine documentaries. I love Planet Earth. I think that's the coolest thing ever. Yeah, shout out to Casey. I think maybe given my path, I might be doing something more along the lines of industrial design or maybe working at a design consultancy. And actually, if I hadn't chosen this internship at UTRC, I was going to work for a sports advertising company in Hong Kong. So maybe that's what I would be doing.
Oh, that's cool. All right, Pine Jog, one more question.
Do you enjoy giving advice to other girls like us?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I like that you guys have questions. I like that you're interested. You have so much opportunity in front of you, especially, you guys over there. And really you can do whatever you want to do as long as you work hard to get there, right? And I think I've been really lucky to have mentors and people in my life who have shown me opportunities or helped me make decisions. And if you guys can find people like that who will do that for you as well, I don't think there's anything really more useful or valuable that you could get or ask for?
Well said. And that was a great question. You all had fantastic questions. Pine Jog, if you want to stick around for a little bit after we do sign off, please do. But thank you all so much. Great questions, everyone. And Alex, a huge thank you to you. This has been tremendous. Your words of wisdom, your journey to share your path has been really amazing. So we definitely thank you for your time and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. And of course, you can follow United Technologies on all their social media channels. Check out their website. They do really, really tremendous things. Now, I'd also like to thank all of our STEMExplore after-school partner sites and classrooms that have tuned in live today. Again, great questions, everyone. Now, EarthEcho has some exciting opportunities coming up. STEMExplore will continue to feature women in STEM careers with our virtual career connections tonight. We have several live events scheduled in November and through December. Again, visit www.earthecho.org to see our entire lineup and to register. Of course, be sure to stay tuned and connected with EarthEcho on all of our social media channels, as well as earthecho.org. And thank you again to our wonderful STEMExplore mentor, Alex Dorgan, and to United Technologies for their tremendous support of our programming. On behalf of EarthEcho International, thank you for joining us and keep exploring. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.